The kitchen in Houston is dim when I step inside, and I greet Lily with a soft smile. She keeps scrubbing the counter, shoulders tight, eyes lowered. "Lily, you can rest," I say, but she shakes her head. Donna wants it clean before she eats. I lift the small pendant on her neck without thinking. "Where did you get this?" She freezes, breath caught. "I had it when they found me," she whispers. My chest locks. Meg wore the same pendant the day she vanished. It can't be true. It shouldn't be true. But Lily's trembling tells me more than words can. Silence gathers between us. If this is the truth returning to me after all these years, I won't run again. A pendant lost once. A sister found in the wrong home. One breath is all it takes to break a decade of lies. Stay tuned. It's coming soon. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Linda Hayes' kitchen window. Outside Houston's suburbs, sprinklers hissed across small lawns. She spread papers across her wooden table like playing cards in a losing hand. The Social Security benefits letter crinkled under her fingers. $3,800 a month. Enough for the mortgage, utilities, and her blood pressure pills. The Medicare card sat beside it, plastic edges worn smooth from her wallet. Linda counted the numbers twice. Then a third time. The arithmetic stayed the same, but the silence in the house grew heavier with each calculation. Her pill organizer clicked open. Monday through Sunday, morning through night. 28 small compartments holding back time. The bathroom heater rattled in the hallway like an old man clearing his throat. She walked to the refrigerator and paused. Photos covered the white surface like a family shrine. Her parents, young and hopeful. Herself at 30, holding a patent certificate for her first household invention. And there, in the center, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and a heart-shaped pendant catching sunlight. Megan. Linda touched the photo with 2 fingers, then pulled her hand away quickly. 34 years since the county fair. 34 years since she'd let go of that small hand to fish for coins in her jacket pocket. The ache started in her chest, sharp and familiar. She turned away from the refrigerator and busied herself wiping down counters that were already clean. That evening, gravel crunched in the driveway. Car doors slammed with purpose. Linda smoothed her blouse and opened the front door before Brad could knock. He stood there holding roses wrapped in grocery store cellophane and a small velvet box that made her heart skip irregularly. "Ready for dinner?" Brad's smile was confident, but his eyes darted past her into the house, as if checking for competition. At Romano's restaurant, red tablecloths and plastic wine glasses created an atmosphere of affordable romance. The hostess seated them near the window where traffic lights painted their faces in cycles of red and green. Brad ordered for both of them without asking. Chicken parmesan and house wine. His fingers drummed against the table while he talked about weather and gas prices and anything except the small box. Sitting between the salt and pepper shakers. "Linda," he said finally. His voice dropped to what he probably thought was an intimate whisper. "We're not meant to grow old alone." The ring emerged from its velvet cave. A modest diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Pretty enough for a woman her age, practical enough for a man with debt. Brad slipped the ring onto her finger. The metal was cold, then warm, then somehow both at once. "Let me be your family," he said. Linda looked at the ring-catching restaurant light. She thought about empty houses and morning pills and the sound of her own footsteps echoing through rooms where conversation used to live. "Yes," she heard herself say. Brad's relief was immediate and overwhelming. He flagged down the waitress to order champagne they couldn't really afford. Then he pulled out his phone and started scrolling through family photos. "You'll love my family," he said, swiping through images. "Mother's been alone too long. Kyle and his wife keep her company, but she needs more women around." The photos showed a 2-story house with white columns and a perfectly maintained lawn. Judith Collins, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, posed in the center of most pictures. Brad's younger brother Kyle appeared in several shots, usually holding a beer and grinning. And there was Lily, always in the background, carrying plates from the kitchen. Standing by the sink with her back turned. Half visible in doorways, never quite part of the family circle. Linda studied Lily's posture in each photo. shoulders hunched, head down, hands busy with tasks while others relaxed. Your brother's wife seems busy, Linda said carefully. Brad laughed and put the phone away. Lily keeps the household running. She's good at that sort of thing. Very domestic. Something in his tone made Linda's chest tighten. But she blamed the champagne and the fluorescent lights and her own tendency to see shadows where none existed. On the drive home, Brad talked about merging their lives, their businesses, their bank accounts. He used words like synergy and partnership and financial security, while Linda watched suburban houses blur past in the darkness. Your product development company and my household goods distribution, he said. We could be unstoppable together. Why compete when we can dominate? Linda laughed, but it felt forced. Let's merge hearts first, spreadsheets later. Brad squeezed her hand and agreed, but his fingers lingered on her engagement ring. When he dropped her off at her front door, he kissed her goodnight with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just closed a profitable deal. Inside her empty house, Linda sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the ring. It felt heavier than it should. Like a promise that might cost more than she'd planned to spend. She walked to the bathroom mirror and practiced smiling. Practiced looking like a woman who'd found love at 61 instead of a woman who'd settled for company. The reflection smiled back, but something in her eyes remained unconvinced. From the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed its familiar song. Photos rustled against the white surface when the air conditioning kicked on. Megan's 7-year-old face watched the empty room with eyes that would never grow older. Linda touched her engagement ring once more, then turned off the lights. Tomorrow she would meet Brad's family. Tomorrow she would see if the shadows in those photographs were real or just tricks of lighting and loneliness. But tonight, in the darkness of her bedroom, she allowed herself one moment of honest fear. What if the love she thought she'd found was just another kind of emptiness wearing a prettier face? The house settled around her with small creaks and sighs. Outside, sprinklers continued their endless cycle, watering lawns that would grow green and full and eventually need cutting again. Some patterns, Linda thought as sleep finally claimed her, never really changed. They just found new ways to repeat themselves. Linda's Honda pulled into the Collins driveway on a Saturday afternoon when suburban lawns buzzed with mowers and children's voices. The house stood taller than the others on the block, white columns framing a front door painted deep blue. She walked up the brick pathway carrying a bottle of wine in her purse. Before she could knock, the door swung open. A stack of papers sat on the entryway table. Mortgage notices with red lettering. Medical bills torn open and hastily stacked. A credit card statement with numbers circled in angry ink. Judith Collins rushed forward with arms outstretched. Silver hair perfectly styled, lipstick applied with precision. Her hug lasted 3 seconds too long. Linda, darling, welcome to our home. Behind Judith's shoulder, someone moved quickly through the hallway. A flash of brown hair and worn sneakers disappearing toward the kitchen. Lily, bring the glasses. Now. Judith's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. From the kitchen came the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing. Water running, ice clinking against glass. Brad appeared in the living room doorway. Come in, come in. Kyle's here somewhere. The living room smelled like furniture polish and something burning on the stove. Family photos covered every surface. Judith in formal poses. Brad and Kyle fishing. Holiday gatherings where everyone smiled at the camera except the person taking the picture. Kyle emerged from the kitchen carrying a beer bottle. 35 years old with Brad's jawline and their mother's calculating eyes. So you're the famous Linda. Brad won't shut up about you. His handshake lingered too long. From the kitchen came a crash. Something glass hitting tile. Lily. Judith's voice sharpened like a blade. What did you break this time? Sorry, ma'am. Just a water glass. I'll clean it up. The voice was soft. Apologetic. Practiced in the art of making herself smaller. Lily appeared in the doorway balancing a tray of drinks. Her hair was pulled back with an elastic band that had seen better days. The apron around her waist was faded from too many washings. She moved carefully around the room, setting glasses on coasters that she'd apparently placed earlier. When she reached Linda, their eyes met briefly. Lily's were brown and tired and held a wariness that made Linda's chest tighten. Thank you, Linda said. Lily nodded and hurried back toward the kitchen where something was boiling over on the stove. Sit, sit. Judith gestured to an armchair that faced the kitchen doorway. We're so excited to meet Brad's special lady. From the kitchen came the sound of pots clanging and water splashing. Through the doorway, Linda watched Lily moving between the stove and sink with the efficiency of someone who'd done these tasks 1,000 times. Lily, where's the appetizer? And wipe down this counter. It's embarrassing, Judith called without turning her head. Yes, ma'am. Coming right up. Brad and Kyle had settled into the couch, remote control already in Kyle's hand. Sports highlights flickered across the television screen. Their conversation centered on football scores and stock prices and who was buying whom in their industry. Judith leaned forward conspiratorially. Men, right? Give them a TV and they disappear. Through the kitchen doorway, Linda watched Lily arranging crackers and cheese on a plate. Her movements were quick and precise, like someone who'd learned that efficiency meant survival. Does Lily need help? Linda asked. I don't mind lending a hand. Judith's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Oh no, we didn't invite a CEO to wash dishes. Lily needs to earn her keep anyway. The words hit Linda like a slap. Earn her keep? We took her in when she had nothing. No family, no money, no place to go. Judith's voice carried the tone of someone recounting a great charity. She owes this family everything. Linda felt something cold settle in her stomach. She's Kyle's wife. She's Kyle's responsibility. And mine. Someone has to teach these girls how to run a proper household. From the kitchen came a soft clatter. Lily appeared carrying the appetizer plate, her knuckles white around the edges. Set it here. Judith pointed to the coffee table. And bring napkins. The cloth ones, not paper. Lily disappeared again. Through the doorway, Linda could see her opening and closing drawers with increasing urgency. Top drawer, left side. Judith called without looking. How many times do I have to tell you? Sorry, ma'am. Found them. Lily returned with cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles. As she bent to arrange them on the table, Linda noticed papers scattered on the kitchen counter. A healthcare statement with emergency room visit, Lillian Collins, printed across the top. Next to it lay a pay stub from a grocery store. The net pay amount made Linda's breath catch. $347. For 2 weeks of work. Lily, dinner won't cook itself. Judith's voice cut through Linda's thoughts. Yes, ma'am. Lily vanished into the kitchen again. The sound of chopping began, rhythmic and hurried. Linda tried to focus on the conversation flowing around her. Judith talked about neighborhood gossip and church committees. Brad and Kyle debated the merits of various investment strategies. But her eyes kept drifting toward the kitchen doorway. Lily moved like someone who'd learned to be invisible. Quick steps, quiet motions, never staying in one place long enough to be criticized for standing idle. Do you ever get to sit down and eat with us? Linda asked during a lull in conversation. The room fell silent. Brad's beer bottle paused halfway to his lips. Kyle looked up from his phone. Judith's smile tightened at the corners. From the kitchen came the soft sound of chopping, then silence. Lily appeared in the doorway, dish towel clutched in her hands. They like things a certain way. It's okay. I'm used to it. Her smile was practiced. Perfect. Empty. Besides, Kyle added with a laugh, someone has to keep the kitchen running. That's what wives are for, right? The men chuckled. Judith nodded approvingly. Linda felt nausea rise in her throat. Dinner was pot roast with vegetables that had been cooked to perfection. Lily served each plate with the precision of a restaurant server, then retreated to the kitchen where she ate standing up over the sink. Through the doorway, Linda watched Lily take quick bites between washing dishes and preparing dessert. She moved constantly, never resting, never sitting, never joining the conversation that flowed around her absence. She's quiet, Linda observed. That's the way we like it, Judith replied. Too many women talk too much these days. Lily knows her place. After dinner, Linda excused herself to use the restroom. On her way back, she passed the kitchen and stopped. Lily stood at the sink, shoulders shaking slightly. Her reflection in the window above showed tears streaming down her face, but her movements never slowed. Wash, rinse, dry. Wash, rinse, dry. Linda stepped into the kitchen. Are you all right? Lily spun around, wiping her face quickly with her sleeve. Fine. Just tired. Her eyes were red and swollen. The dish towel in her hands was damp with more than dishwater. This isn't right, Linda said softly. Lily glanced toward the living room where voices continued their comfortable chatter. Please don't say anything. It'll only make things worse. The fear in her voice was unmistakable. Real. Immediate. Linda wanted to say more, but Judith's voice called from the living room. Linda? Everything okay back there? Coming, Linda called back. As she walked away, she heard Lily's quiet footsteps returning to their endless circuit between stove and sink and cabinet and table. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and dark windows. Linda gripped the steering wheel with both hands, Brad's voice flowing past her like background noise. He talked about how well the evening had gone, how much his family liked her, how perfect everything was going to be. But Linda's mind stayed fixed on the image of Lily standing at that sink. Tears falling into dishwater, shoulders carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for any one person to bear. At home, Linda sat in her car for several minutes after Brad drove away. The house looked different somehow. Smaller, but also precious in its simplicity. No one here ordered her around. No one here took her paycheck. No one here made her cry over dirty dishes. Inside, she made tea and sat at her kitchen table. The Social Security letter still lay where she'd left it that morning. $3,800. Enough for dignity, enough for choice. She thought about Lily's pay stub. $347 for 2 weeks of serving and cleaning and cooking and being told to be grateful for the privilege. The Medicare card caught the light from the overhead fixture. Such a small piece of plastic. But it represented something that Lily apparently didn't have. Security. Independence. The right to make decisions about her own life. Linda touched her engagement ring and felt its weight differently now. Not the weight of love and partnership, but the weight of questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. What kind of family had she agreed to join? And what kind of man had proposed to her while his family treated his brother's wife like hired help? Outside, suburban sprinklers continued their nightly ritual. Inside, Linda sat alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that something was very wrong in the house with white columns and perfect lawns. The refrigerator hummed softly. Megan's photo rustled against the white surface. And Linda wondered if finding one family might mean losing another. Or if some families weren't worth finding at all. Part 3: The Necklace and the Peach Cobbler. The morning of Linda's second visit dawned gray and humid. Storm clouds gathered over Houston's suburbs like bruised thoughts refusing to clear. She drove through neighborhoods where sprinklers still ran despite the threatening sky. The Collins house came into view with its white columns gleaming against the darkening horizon. But something felt different as Linda parked in the driveway. The curtains in the front windows were drawn tight. No welcoming light spilled onto the porch. She knocked twice before the door opened. Brad appeared, shirt wrinkled and hair uncombed. Come in quick. We're having a situation. The smell hit her immediately. Roast chicken and bleach. The chemical tang of cleaning products mixed with Sunday dinner preparations. From somewhere in the house came the sound of scrubbing. Urgent. Desperate. In the living room, Judith stood with her arms crossed, staring down at a dark stain spreading across the cream-colored carpet. Her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. On her knees beside the stain, Lily worked with a scrub brush and a bucket of soapy water. Her hair had escaped its ponytail and hung in damp strands around her face. The knees of her jeans were soaked through. I don't know how many times I have to tell you, Judith's voice cut through the room like glass. Red wine doesn't belong anywhere near the good carpet. Lazy girls who don't know how to keep a home shouldn't be trusted with nice things. Lily's scrubbing intensified. The brush made harsh rasping sounds against the carpet fibers. Kyle sprawled across the couch, thumbs moving across his phone screen. Maybe we should just replace the carpet. Get something that hides stains better. With what money? Judith snapped. Your wife needs to learn responsibility. If she can't afford to replace what she ruins, she needs to fix it. Brad settled into his recliner and picked up the remote. It's just carpet, Mother. Just carpet? Just carpet? Judith's voice rose to a pitch that made Linda's teeth ache. This is a $1,200 Persian rug your father bought me for our anniversary. Nothing in this house is just anything. Lily's shoulders hunched lower. Her scrubbing never paused. Linda set her purse on the side table and knelt beside Lily. "Let me help." "No." The word came out sharp and panicked. Lily's eyes darted toward Judith. "I've got it. Almost done." But Linda could see the stain wasn't budging. If anything, the scrubbing was spreading it deeper into the fibers. "Sometimes salt works better than soap," Linda suggested quietly. Judith's laugh was bitter. "Salt? On Persian wool? Clearly you've never owned anything worth preserving." The words hung in the air like smoke. Linda felt heat rise in her cheeks. Lily pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and sunlight from the window caught something at her throat. A thin gold chain. A small pendant in the shape of a heart. Linda's world tilted sideways. The pendant was identical to the one in Megan's photograph. The same size. The same shape. Even the same tiny notch on the left side where 7-year-old fingers had worried the metal smooth. "Your necklace," Linda said, her voice barely a whisper. Lily's hand flew to her throat, fingers covering the pendant protectively. "It's nothing special. Just old. Where did you get it?" The scrubbing stopped entirely. Lily's knuckles went white around the brush handle. "I've always had it," she said carefully. "Since I was little." Judith clapped her hands together sharply. "Enough chatting. That stain won't disappear on its own." But Linda couldn't look away from the pendant. She'd touched its twin 1,000 times. Had kissed it goodnight when Megan wore it to bed. Had helped clasp it around a 7-year-old neck on the morning of the county fair. "Dinner's ready," Kyle announced, though he hadn't moved from the couch. Lily gathered the cleaning supplies with shaking hands. The stain remained, darker now from all the scrubbing. A permanent mark on something that had once been beautiful. In the dining room, the table was set for 4. 4 places. 4 chairs. No spot for the woman who'd cooked the meal. Judith took her place at the head of the table. Brad and Kyle flanked her on either side. Linda was directed to the remaining chair, which faced the kitchen doorway. Through the opening, she could see Lily moving between stove and counter. Steam rose from pots. The oven timer beeped insistently. The roast chicken arrived first, golden and perfectly seasoned. Then came roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, and homemade rolls still warm from the oven. Each dish was placed with care, served with precision. Lily moved around the table filling water glasses and replacing empty bread baskets. She never sat down, never took a plate for herself. Never joined the conversation that flowed around her like water around a stone. "The chicken is excellent," Linda said as Lily refilled her glass. "Thank you," Lily replied softly. "My grandmother's recipe." "Your grandmother was a good cook then." "I barely remember her. But I remember the smell of her kitchen. Rosemary and butter and something sweet baking in the oven." Judith's fork clinked against her plate. "Lily should be grateful we give her a chance to practice these skills. Without us, she'd be eating microwave dinners alone in some studio apartment." The table fell quiet. Even Kyle looked up from his phone. "Where would you be eating?" Linda asked. "If not here?" "This is my home," Lily said quickly. "With my husband's family." But her eyes said something different. They said she'd been answering that question wrong for so long that the right answer had been forgotten. Dessert appeared as if by magic. A steaming peach cobbler in a chipped glass dish. The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar filled the room. "Lily, dish it up," Judith commanded. Lily returned from the kitchen carrying dessert plates and a large serving spoon. She moved around the table, placing generous portions in front of each person. When she reached her own place at the table, she paused. There was no plate waiting for her. "You don't like peaches?" Linda asked. Lily's spoon hesitated over the cobbler dish. "I'm allergic. I get hives all over my arms and face." "Allergic to peaches?" Linda felt the room shift around her like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "My sister used to buy me funnel cakes at the county fair instead. She said peaches were for other kids." The words hit Linda's chest like a physical blow. Sister. County fair. Funnel cakes. The exact same words Megan had used 34 years ago when Linda had offered her a piece of peach pie at the fair. The puzzle pieces weren't just clicking. They were screaming. "What sister?" Linda's voice sounded strange in her own ears. Lily's eyes darted around the table. I don't really remember. I was very young when." "When what?" "When she died," Judith interrupted smoothly. "Car accident. Very tragic. Lily was just a child." But Lily's face had gone pale. Her fingers trembled around the serving spoon. That's not. She started, then stopped herself. Not what? Linda leaned forward. Nothing. I get confused sometimes. About the past. Judith waved a dismissive hand. Allergic, dramatic, same thing. She eats well enough here. Don't let her make you feel sorry for her. The table erupted in comfortable laughter. Everyone except Linda and Lily, who stared at each other across a gulf of unspoken understanding. Linda wanted to grab Lily's shoulders and shake the truth out of her. Wanted to demand answers about sisters and county fairs and heart-shaped pendants. But something in Lily's eyes warned her to wait. To be careful. To remember that truth could be dangerous in houses where it wasn't welcome. Well, Brad said, pushing back from the table, that was delicious. As always. Lily, clear the table, Judith added. And don't forget to soak the serving dishes. That cobbler will stick like cement if you let it sit. Yes, ma'am. Lily began collecting plates with the same mechanical precision she brought to everything. But her hands were shaking badly now. One of the forks clattered to the floor. Careful, Kyle said without looking up from his phone. We can't afford to replace the good silverware. As the family moved toward the living room, Linda lingered in the dining room. Through the kitchen doorway, she watched Lily scraping plates and running water. The pendant caught the overhead light with each movement. A small heart beating at the base of her throat. Linda thought about another little girl. Another heart-shaped pendant. Another sister who'd loved funnel cakes and hated peaches and disappeared into thin air on a day when the world changed forever. The pieces of the puzzle were all there. She just had to find the courage to put them together and face what the picture revealed. Even if that picture changed everything she thought she knew about love and family and the man who'd put a ring on her finger. Even if the truth was more complicated and dangerous than she was prepared to handle. Because somewhere in this house of perfect appearances and hidden cruelties, Linda was beginning to suspect that her lost sister might be washing dishes in the kitchen. Wearing their grandmother's necklace and calling strangers, ma'am, while tears fell into dirty dishwater. And if that was true, then everything else was a lie worth exposing. Linda's kitchen table became a war room of memories and evidence. She'd cleared away everything except the essentials: yellowed missing child flyers, faded Polaroids. Her engagement ring, and a manila folder her parents had guarded like a shrine. The morning light fell harsh across the photographs, revealing details that had blurred with time and hope. In one image, 7-year-old Megan stood at the county fair entrance gate, cotton candy pink in one hand, Linda's fingers in the other. The heart pendant around Megan's neck caught the camera flash like a tiny star. Linda held a magnifying glass over the photo, studying every detail of that necklace. The delicate chain, the small heart, the distinctive notch on the left side where the metal had been bent and smoothed by nervous fingers. It was identical to the one she'd seen around Lily's throat. The manila folder crackled as she opened it. Inside lay the archaeology of a family's destruction. Police reports typed on carbon paper. Handwritten witness statements. A list of carnival employees interviewed and cleared. The last missing child flyer her mother had taped to the refrigerator before grief finally claimed her voice. Linda touched the paper with trembling fingers, remembering how her parents had lived at the same kitchen table for months afterward. Waiting for phone calls that never came. Organizing search parties that found nothing. Writing letters to television producers who promised to help but never did. She'd outlived their hope, outlived their search, and somehow, impossibly, she might have found what they'd died believing was lost forever. Her laptop sat open beside the photographs. 3 browser tabs displayed everything she could find about Lily Collins. Employment records, marriage certificate, emergency room visits. The pattern was consistent and disturbing. No family history before her marriage to Kyle. No school records. No social media presence extending back more than 5 years. As if Lily Collins had simply materialized into existence as a fully formed adult with no past worth mentioning. But Lillian Harris, Megan Harris, those searches returned nothing at all. The front doorbell rang at exactly 10:30. Linda swept the photographs into the manila folder and slid her laptop closed. Through the peephole, she could see Brad standing on the porch with a leather briefcase and a smile that looked strained around the edges. "Morning, beautiful." He kissed her cheek and stepped inside without being invited. "Thought we could talk business." He set the briefcase on her coffee table and opened it with the flourish of a magician revealing his best trick. Inside were spreadsheets and business plans and financial projections that painted a picture of spectacular future success. "Take a look at these numbers," Brad said, spreading papers across the table. "Your product development expertise combined with my distribution network. We could capture 30% of the household goods market within 2 years." Linda studied the spreadsheets, but the numbers swam in front of her eyes. Revenue projections, profit margins, market penetration analysis, all very impressive, all very professional, all very vague about current financial reality. "These are projections," Linda said. "What about your actual performance? Last quarter's sales? Current cash flow?" Brad's smile flickered like a candle in wind. "Well, you know how it is. The market's been challenging lately. Supply chain issues, consumer confidence down. But that's exactly why we need to merge our resources now. Strike while our competitors are weak." He reached for the coffee she'd offered and knocked over a stack of papers. As he gathered them up, Linda saw what he'd been trying to hide. Red stamped notices, final payment demand, 30 days to cure default. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. "Brad," Linda's voice was quiet but firm. "Show me everything." His hands stilled on the papers. "Everything what?" "Your real financial statements. The ones you file with the state. The ones your accountant prepares for tax purposes. I don't think you need to worry about the technical details. What matters is our future potential." Linda reached across the table and pulled the hidden papers toward her. The numbers told a story Brad's presentations had carefully avoided. 6 months behind on commercial rent. Credit cards maxed out and in default. Payroll taxes unpaid. Equipment being repossessed. "You're bankrupt," Linda said. "Temporarily illiquid." Brad's voice carried the desperate cheer of a man trying to convince himself. "With your investment, we can turn this around overnight. Your retirement savings as working capital. Your house as collateral. We'll be partners in everything." Linda felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You want me to risk my house? I want us to build an empire together. What's the point of financial security if you're alone?" She thought about Lily standing at the kitchen sink with tears in her eyes. About Judith's voice cutting through the house like broken glass. About the way Brad's family treated their daughter-in-law like unpaid hired help. "What empire?" Linda asked. "The one where women do all the work while men take all the credit?" Brad's smile finally collapsed entirely. "That has nothing to do with this. Doesn't it? You want my money to save your business. Your family wants Lily's labor to run their house. Same pattern, different woman. You're being dramatic. Lily's fine. She has a home, food, security. She has a prison where the bars are made of debt and fear." Brad stood up abruptly, papers scattering across the coffee table. "You don't understand how families work. How business works. How the real world works. I understand how exploitation works." The words hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. Brad stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions. Surprise, anger, calculation. "I thought you were different," he said finally. "I thought you understood partnership. Compromise, working together toward common goals. I thought you loved me for who I am, not what I own." Love doesn't pay the bills, Linda. Love doesn't build security. Love doesn't protect you when you're old and alone and forgotten. He gathered his papers with sharp, angry motions. The spreadsheets and projections and promises went back into the briefcase like evidence being destroyed. "When you're ready to think practically instead of emotionally, call me," he said. "But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last forever." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. Linda sat in the sudden silence, staring at her engagement ring. The diamond caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the wall, but the beauty felt hollow now. Deceptive. She walked to her kitchen table and opened the manila folder again. Megan's photograph smiled up at her with 7-year-old optimism and trust. The heart pendant around her neck seemed to pulse with life and hope and the absolute certainty that her big sister would always keep her safe. Linda had failed once. At a county fair 34 years ago, she'd let go of a small hand for just a moment and lost everything that mattered. She wouldn't fail again, whatever it cost, whatever it risked, however it changed her life. She wouldn't let another sister disappear into the darkness while she stood by and watched. The engagement ring slipped off her finger easily. Too easily, as if it had never really belonged there at all. She set it beside Megan's photograph and reached for her phone. There were calls to make, questions to ask, truths to uncover. And somewhere across town, a woman was washing dishes and wearing a heart-shaped pendant and calling strangers, ma'am. While pieces of her real identity lay scattered like puzzle pieces waiting to be put back together. Linda had spent 61 years learning how to build a life. Now it was time to learn how to save one. Even if it meant destroying everything she'd thought she wanted in the process. Rain drummed against Linda's bedroom windows like fingers tapping an urgent message. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside her bed, a cardboard box open between her knees. The smell of dust and old paper filled the room, mixed with the faint scent of vanilla from a candle that had burned down to nothing years ago. Inside the box lay the archaeology of childhood. County fair wristbands faded to unrecognizable colors. A photo strip from a carnival booth showing two girls making faces at the camera. Ticket stubs for rides and games, some still stained with cotton candy and caramel apple grease. Linda lifted each item carefully, as if sudden movements might cause 34 years of memories to crumble into dust. The photo strip made her chest tighten. 4 frames of pure joy. Linda at 15, Megan at 7. Silly faces and gap-toothed grins and arms wrapped around each other like nothing could ever separate them. In the third frame, Megan was pointing at something outside the booth. Her mouth was open in excitement, the heart pendant catching the flash. In the fourth frame, she was already turning away, tugging Linda's hand toward whatever adventure had caught her attention. Always moving, always curious, always trusting that her big sister would follow wherever she led. Linda closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her like warm water. The sounds of the county fair surrounded her. Carnival music mixing with screaming children and barkers calling from game booths. The smell of fried foods and diesel fuel and summer sweat. Funnel cake first, then rides. Megan had shouted over the noise, jumping up and down with excitement. You promised. They'd stood in line behind families with strollers and teenagers on dates. Megan had bounced from foot to foot, chattering about which rides they'd try first, which games she wanted to play, whether they'd stay for the fireworks. Can we get the biggest one? She'd asked when they reached the front of the line. With extra powdered sugar? Linda had laughed and said yes to everything. Yes to the biggest funnel cake. Yes to extra sugar. Yes to staying late and spending too much money and riding the Ferris wheel twice because Megan loved being up high, where she could see the whole fair spread out below like a glittering toy. They'd found a picnic table near the entrance gate. Megan had torn off pieces of funnel cake with sticky fingers, talking between bites about school and friends and the new book she was reading about horses. I want to ride horses when I grow up, she'd said. Big ones. Fast ones. I want to go everywhere and see everything. Linda had been fishing coins from her jacket pocket for ride tickets when it happened. One moment Megan was sitting across from her, powdered sugar dusting her nose. The next moment, she was gone. Just gone. Linda had searched the crowd with growing panic. Had called Megan's name until her voice went hoarse. Had run between game booths and food stands and the haunted house, certain she'd find a 7-year-old girl hiding or playing or just momentarily lost. But Megan had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed at all. The memory broke like glass against the present moment. Linda opened her eyes and found herself crying onto the photo strip, salt water blurring the images of 2 sisters who'd thought they had forever. She wiped her face with her sleeve and continued going through the box. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was a small velvet jewelry box. Inside lay Megan's backup necklace. The one she'd begged their mother to buy as a spare in case she lost the one she wore every day. An identical heart pendant on an identical gold chain. Linda lifted it carefully, holding it up to the bedside lamp. The metal was tarnished now, but the shape was unmistakable. The same size and style as the pendant she'd seen around Lily's throat. Even the same small notch where 7-year-old fingers had worried the edge. But this wasn't the necklace Megan had been wearing when she disappeared. This was the spare that had stayed in their jewelry box for decades, waiting for a sister who would never come home to claim it. which meant the necklace Lily wore was either the original pendant that had vanished with Megan or an impossible coincidence that Linda's heart refused to accept. She thought about other patterns she'd been too distracted to see clearly. Lily's careful way of moving through the Collins house, as if she'd learned to make herself invisible to avoid criticism. Her automatic responses to orders, spoken in the tone of someone who'd been trained to comply without question. Linda remembered her own business years, the subtle ways men had tried to minimize her contributions. How they'd close laptop screens when she approached. How, trust me, was always the prelude to decisions that benefited them more than her. How they'd used her expertise while treating her like a junior partner in her own success. Brad's marriage proposal suddenly felt less like love and more like acquisition. Her expertise, her financial resources, her reputation, all valuable assets in a business that was failing without them. The rain against the windows grew heavier, matching the rhythm of Linda's thoughts. She spread the photographs across the carpet and studied them with new eyes. What if Megan hadn't died in an accident as a child? What if she'd survived, somehow, and grown up with no memory of her real family? What if she'd been found or taken by people who'd raised her to believe a different story about her origins? What if the Collins family knew exactly who Lily was, and used that knowledge to keep her trapped in their house? Isolated and dependent, with nowhere else to go? The pieces fit together with horrible precision. A lost child, a family that thrived on control. A young woman who accepted abuse because she'd been taught to believe she deserved nothing better. Linda gathered the photographs and jewelry back into the box, but kept Megan's spare pendant in her palm. The metal was cold against her skin, but it felt like holding onto possibility. Hope. The chance to fix something that had been broken for far too long. Outside, the storm was building towards something larger. Thunder rolled across the suburbs like a promise of change coming whether anyone was ready or not. Inside her quiet house, Linda Hayes began planning how to save her sister for the second time in her life. This time, she wouldn't let go. The legal clinic occupied a strip mall between a tax preparation office and a used bookstore. Linda sat in her Honda for several minutes before going inside, watching older women enter and exit with manila folders clutched against their chests like shields. The waiting room smelled of industrial carpet and burnt coffee. Chairs upholstered in worn burgundy fabric faced a reception desk where a young woman with kind eyes checked names off appointment lists. On the wall, bulletin boards advertised support groups, financial counseling, and legal aid for seniors. Elder fraud, domestic violence, wage theft protection. The words seemed to leap off the flyers and arrange themselves into patterns Linda was only beginning to recognize. A woman in her 70s sat across from Linda, a shoebox full of papers balanced on her knees. Bank statements and medical bills and correspondence with insurance companies who'd found reasons to deny her claims. Her hands shook slightly as she organized the documents into neat piles. "First time?" she asked Linda. "Yes. You?" The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Third time. My son keeps finding new ways to access my accounts. Each time I think I've protected myself, he figures out another angle." Linda felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Your own son? They think because we're old, we're stupid. Easy targets. He tells people I'm confused, that I need his help managing my finances. Meanwhile, he's draining my retirement savings to pay for his gambling debts." Before Linda could respond, a door opened and a woman emerged from the inner office. Gray-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a navy blazer that had seen better days but still commanded respect. "Linda Hayes?" The voice was professional but warm. "I'm Janet Ruiz." Janet's office was small but organized. Law books lined the walls, interspersed with certificates and thank you cards from clients. A coffee mug sat on the desk next to a stack of case files thick enough to build furniture with. "What brings you here today?" Janet asked, settling into her chair. Linda opened her purse and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of Lily's emergency room visit, copies of pay stubs, and handwritten notes about the conversations she'd witnessed at the Collins house. "I think someone I care about is being financially exploited," Linda said. "Maybe worse." She told Janet everything. About Lily's living situation. About the way the family spoke to her and about her. About wages that disappeared as quickly as they were earned. About a young woman who seemed to have no past and no future beyond serving a family that treated her like property. Janet listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When Linda finished, the silence stretched between them like a bridge being built. "How well do you know this young woman?" Janet asked. "I'm still figuring that out. Because what you're describing could constitute several different crimes. Financial exploitation, coerced labor, psychological abuse. But the victim has to be willing to speak up. Has to be ready to leave the situation. What if she doesn't know she has options? Then our job is to help her understand what those options are." Janet pulled a business card from her desk drawer and wrote a phone number on the back. "This is the direct line for a social worker who specializes in domestic abuse cases. Financial abuse is domestic abuse, even when it doesn't involve physical violence." Linda took the card and stared at the phone number. 10 digits that could change everything or destroy it completely. "What happens if we're wrong?" Linda asked. "What if Lily is happy with her life? What if interfering makes things worse for her? What happens if you're right and you do nothing?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire that was already burning. That evening, Linda drove to a diner on the edge of town where highway traffic created a constant white noise of anonymity. She'd called Lily that afternoon, suggesting they meet for coffee. Away from the Collins house. Away from listening ears and watching eyes. Lily arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a thin hoodie despite the cold. Her eyes scanned the parking lot before she entered, as if checking for familiar cars or faces that didn't belong. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth across from Linda. "Had to finish cleaning up after dinner." The waitress brought coffee without being asked. Linda watched Lily wrap her hands around the cup as if warming herself against more than just the October chill. "How are you?" Linda asked. "Fine. Good. Just tired." But her eyes told a different story. Dark circles. A nervous flutter when the diner door opened and other customers entered. The constant awareness of someone who'd learned to monitor her environment for threats. "Lily," Linda said carefully, "do you remember much about your childhood? Before you married Kyle?" Lily's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "Not much. I was in foster care for a while. Different families. You know how it is." "What about your parents? Siblings? Anyone from before?" "They died when I was little. Car accident." The words came out rehearsed, like lines from a play she'd performed too many times. Linda pulled her phone from her purse and scrolled to a photograph she'd scanned earlier. 7-year-old Megan at a birthday party, heart pendant catching the camera flash, gap-toothed grin wide with joy. "Does this little girl look familiar to you?" Lily glanced at the screen, then looked again more carefully. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, confusion, fear. No, I don't think so." But her voice was uncertain. "What about this?" Linda showed her another photo. The county fair entrance with its bright signs and ticket booths. This time, Lily's reaction was unmistakable. She pressed a hand to her temple as if fighting off a sudden headache. "I have dreams sometimes," she said quietly. "About a place like this. Loud music and fried food and lights everywhere. But I can't remember being there. It's just feelings, colors, the smell of cotton candy." Linda's heart hammered against her ribs. "What else do you remember?" A woman's voice. "Someone calling my name. But not Lily. Something else." She looked up at Linda with eyes that seemed suddenly younger. More vulnerable. "Do you think dreams can be memories? Even if they don't make sense?" Before Linda could answer, Lily's phone buzzed with a text message. Her face went pale as she read it. "I have to go," she said, already standing. "They're wondering where I am." "Wait." Linda reached across the table. "I want to help you. Whatever you need. A place to stay. Money. Legal help. You don't have to live the way you're living." Lily stared at her for a long moment. "Why would you help me? You barely know me." Linda thought about missing child flyers and heart-shaped pendants and 34 years of wondering what had happened to a 7-year-old girl. Who'd trusted her big sister to keep her safe? "Because everyone deserves someone who believes they're worth saving," Linda said. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "What if I'm not worth saving, I mean? What if this is all I'm good for? Then they've been lying to you for so long that you've forgotten how to hear the truth." Linda pulled out Janet Ruiz's business card and pressed it into Lily's hand. "When you're ready to remember who you really are, call this number." Day or night. They'll help you find a way out. Lily stared at the card as if it were written in a foreign language. What if I call and there's nothing to remember? What if this is just who I am? Then we'll build something new together. Something better. Something true. Lily tucked the card into her pocket and headed for the door. At the last moment, she turned back. Thank you, she said, for thinking I might be worth the trouble. After she left, Linda sat in the empty booth, staring at the photographs on her phone. 7-year-old Megan smiled back at her from 34 years ago. Full of trust and joy and the absolute certainty that her big sister would always be there to catch her if she fell. This time, Linda thought, she wouldn't be too late. This time, she'd be strong enough to pull her sister back from whatever darkness had claimed her. Even if it meant fighting a family that had spent years convincing Lily that darkness was all she deserved. Even if it meant destroying the life Linda had built to save the life that had been stolen from both of them. Outside the diner window, traffic flowed past in endless streams of light. People going home to families and dinners and conversations around tables where everyone had a place to sit. Soon, Linda promised herself, Lily would remember what that felt like too. The storm hit Houston with the fury of something that had been building pressure for weeks. Rain lashed Linda's windows in sheets while thunder rolled across the suburbs like artillery fire. She'd been staring at her laptop screen for hours, trying to focus on quarterly reports, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in her chest told her to answer anyway. Linda? The voice was barely a whisper, competing with crashes and shouting in the background. Lily? Where are you? At home, but something's wrong. Judith is. A crash interrupted her words, followed by Judith's voice screaming about disrespect and ingratitude. What happened? I tried to say no. About working the weekend shift at the store. I told her I was sick, that I needed to rest, and she. Another crash. The sound of something ceramic exploding against a wall. I'm coming to get you. No, you can't. It'll make things worse. Kyle's here, and Brad, and they're all. But the line went dead. Linda grabbed her keys and purse, not bothering with a coat. The rain soaked through her blouse before she reached the car, but she barely noticed. Her Honda's headlights cut through the storm as she navigated suburban streets that had turned into shallow rivers. The Collins house blazed with light against the dark sky. Every window glowed yellow, as if the building itself was on fire from the inside. Linda could hear the shouting before she even turned off the engine. She ran up the front walk, water streaming from her hair. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the perfect suburban paradise had devolved into chaos. Kitchen chairs lay overturned, dish towels scattered across the floor. In the dining room, shards of what had once been a dinner plate glittered under the chandelier like malicious stars. Lily stood pressed against the kitchen counter, one hand protecting her face, the other wrapped around her ribs. Red marks bloomed across her forearm where fingers had gripped too tight. Judith paced in front of her, face flushed with rage. Ungrateful little bitch. We take you in off the streets, give you a home, a family, and this is how you repay us? Kyle lounged in the doorway, arms crossed, watching his wife cower like it was evening entertainment. Maybe she needs to spend a night outside. Help her remember how good she has it here. Brad appeared from the living room, his face pale but his eyes calculating. When he saw Linda, his expression shifted to something like panic. Linda, what are you doing here? Getting Lily out of here. Linda's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Judith spun around, her anger finding a new target. This is a private family matter. You have no business interfering. Family doesn't treat family like this. Family does what's necessary to maintain order. Something your generation never learned. Linda stepped between Judith and Lily, her body language making her position clear. The only thing I see here is abuse. And it stops now. Abuse? Kyle laughed. We feed her, house her, give her work to keep her busy. That's more than most people get. Linda pulled her phone from her purse and started recording. Say that again. The room fell silent except for the storm raging outside. Kyle's smirk faded. Judith's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You're recording us? Brad's voice cracked. In our own home? I'm documenting crimes. Linda's finger stayed steady on the record button. Financial exploitation. Coercive control. Assault. She nodded toward the red marks on Lily's arm. Should I continue? From her other pocket, Linda pulled a sealed envelope. The DNA test results she'd paid for with a sample from Megan's spare necklace and hair she'd collected from Lily's brush during her last visit. This contains proof, Linda said, placing the envelope on the counter with deliberate precision, that Lily Collins is actually Megan Harris. My sister. The little girl who disappeared from a county fair 34 years ago. The silence that followed was complete. Even the storm seemed to pause. Lily's face went white. What? The heart necklace you wear belonged to our grandmother. The peach allergy. The dreams about county fairs and funnel cakes. The way you remember a sister's voice calling a different name. Linda's voice was gentle but unshakable. They've been lying to you about who you are for so long that you believed their lies were your truth. Judith stepped forward, her voice shrill with desperation. You can't prove anything. That girl has been our daughter-in-law for 5 years. She's legally married to my son. Whatever fantasies you've constructed, the DNA doesn't lie, Linda said. Neither do the financial records showing that Lily's wages go directly into accounts she can't access. Neither do the medical records showing repeated emergency room visits for injuries she couldn't explain. Brad moved toward the envelope, but Linda was faster. She snatched it back and held it against her chest. This family, Linda continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, has kept my sister isolated, financially dependent, and psychologically broken. They've stolen years of her life and convinced her she was lucky to be stolen from. Kyle's bluster finally cracked. We saved her. She was nobody. Nothing. A runaway with no memory and nowhere to go. We gave her purpose. You gave her slavery. The word hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. 3 weeks later, Linda sat in the conference room of Janet Ruiz's law firm. Watching Brad's attorney shuffle papers with the resignation of someone defending an indefensible position. Across the polished table, the Collins family looked smaller than they had in their perfect house. Judith's makeup was smudged. Kyle couldn't sit still. Brad stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. Janet spread documents across the table like evidence in a trial. Bank records, voice transcripts from recordings Lily had made on her phone. Medical reports, employment records showing wages paid to Lily but immediately transferred to accounts controlled by the Collins family. The proposed settlement, Janet said, her voice crisp with professional authority, includes full restitution of wages illegally taken from Ms. Harris over the past 5 years. Additionally, damages for emotional distress, medical expenses, and punitive damages for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She slid a document across to Brad's lawyer. There's also the matter of a permanent protective order prohibiting any member of the Collins family from contacting Ms. Harris directly or indirectly. Brad's lawyer scanned the papers, his face growing more drawn with each page. These damages are substantial. My clients may not have the liquid assets to. Then they'll liquidate other assets, Janet replied. The house, the cars, the business, whatever it takes to make Ms. Harris whole. Judith finally spoke, her voice cracking like old paint. We can fix this. If Linda invests in Brad's company, we can all move forward as a family. No one has to involve courts or. There is no family, Linda said quietly. There never was. There was just a system designed to exploit my sister's vulnerability and my loneliness. Kyle leaned forward, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. Lily, you don't want this. Legal battles, strangers asking questions, having to start over with nothing. Stay with us. I'll treat you better. I promise. Lily sat beside Linda, wearing a simple blue dress that Linda had bought her. No apron, no faded jeans stained with kitchen work. Her hair was clean and styled, and around her throat hung the spare heart pendant that had waited 34 years to find its rightful owner. My name, Lily said, her voice steady for the first time since Linda had known her, is Megan Harris. And I'm going home with my sister. The judge who signed the settlement agreement summarized it in language that left no room for interpretation. Financial restitution, protective orders, criminal referrals to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. Walking out of the courthouse, Linda felt the weight of 34 years lifting from her shoulders. Beside her, Megan walked slowly, as if testing her balance in a world where she suddenly had choices about where to go and what to do when she got there. What happens now? Megan asked. Linda looked up at the sky where storm clouds were finally breaking apart, letting through the first sunshine Houston had seen in days. Now we remember how to be sisters again, she said. And we build something new. Something that belongs to us. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed on a chapter of their lives that was finally, officially over. Ahead of them, everything else was waiting to begin. 6 months after the courthouse steps, Linda woke to the sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen and Megan's voice humming. Something that might have been an old song or just the sound of contentment finding its rhythm. Their duplex sat on a quiet street where children rode bicycles and neighbors waved from their front porches. The nameplate by the door read, Hayes Sisters, in simple block letters that had cost $12 at the hardware store. And felt more valuable than any corporate logo Linda had ever designed. The kitchen table was cluttered with the comfortable chaos of two lives rebuilding themselves from scratch. Community college brochures spread beside Linda's reading glasses. A social work program application filled out in Megan's careful handwriting. Flyers for a senior center workshop where Linda had been invited to speak about financial protection and recognizing elder abuse. Blood pressure pills first, then coffee, Megan said, sliding the weekly pill organizer across the table. That's the rule. Linda rolled her eyes but swallowed the medication dutifully. 6 months ago, she'd managed her health alone, counting pills into containers while silence echoed through empty rooms. Now someone cared whether she took care of herself, and the difference felt revolutionary. What's on the schedule today? Linda asked. Megan consulted a calendar covered with appointments and commitments. Support group meeting at 2. Then we're supposed to finish designing the brochure for the legal clinic. And tonight is the county fair. Linda's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Are you sure you're ready for that? I think so. Maybe. Probably. Megan laughed, and the sound was lighter than it had been even a week ago. I want to see if the smell of funnel cakes brings back anything else. Real memories instead of just feelings and shadows. They'd been working with a therapist who specialized in recovered memory and childhood trauma. Dr. Kim Park, a woman with gentle hands and infinite patience for the slow work of reconstructing a life that had been deliberately erased. The memories came back in pieces. A grandmother who'd taught Megan to cook. Parents who'd read bedtime stories and sang lullabies. A big sister who'd promised to always keep her safe, even when safe turned out to be more complicated than either of them had understood. Do you remember anything new? Linda asked. Yesterday I remembered our cat. Orange tabby with white paws. He used to sleep on my bed and purr so loud it kept me awake. Megan smiled. What was his name? Marmalade. You named him after your favorite breakfast. Marmalade. Megan tested the word like she was trying on clothes that might or might not fit. I can almost hear myself calling him. Almost see him running across the backyard. He lived to be 17. Mom used to say he was waiting for you to come home. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and sorting through the mail that had begun arriving in both their names. Insurance forms, bank statements, a letter from the prosecutor's office updating them on the criminal case against the Collins family. The civil settlement had been finalized 3 months ago. The Collins house had sold to pay restitution. Kyle and Judith were living in a rental apartment across town, prohibited by court order from contacting either sister. Brad's business had dissolved into bankruptcy, and he'd moved to another state. To escape the shame of headlines that painted him as a predator who'd targeted vulnerable women. Do you ever feel sorry for them? Megan asked, reading the prosecutor's update. No, Linda said without hesitation. Do you? Sometimes. Not for what they did, but for who they chose to be. It must be exhausting to live by taking from other people instead of building something yourself. Linda studied her sister's face. In 6 months, Megan had gained weight and color and a way of speaking that suggested she was remembering how to take up space in the world. But more than that, she was developing opinions and preferences and the kind of moral clarity that came from having survived something that could have destroyed her. You're going to be an excellent social worker, Linda said. If they accept me into the program, they'll accept you. Who better to help abuse survivors than someone who survived it herself? That afternoon, their support group met in the fellowship hall of a Methodist church that smelled like coffee and industrial carpet. 12 women ranging in age from their 20s to their 80s. all connected by the common experience of having been exploited by people who claimed to love them. Linda and Megan had started the group with Janet Ruiz's help, but it had quickly taken on a life of its own. Women found each other. Stories were shared. Resources were pooled. Phone numbers were exchanged for the bad days when isolation felt like quicksand. Financial abuse is domestic abuse, Linda said, reading from the brochure they'd designed together. Even when it doesn't involve physical violence. Even when the abuser is a family member. Even when you think you should be grateful for what you have. After the meeting, they drove to the county fairgrounds as the sun set behind Ferris. Wheels and game booths that looked exactly the same as they had 34 years ago. The smell hit them before they even parked the car. Fried food and diesel fuel and the particular sweetness of spun sugar dissolving in humid air. Megan stood at the entrance gate, her hand resting on the metal rail where a 7-year-old girl had stood decades ago. Trusting that her big sister would never let go. "Do you remember?" Linda asked. "I remember being excited. I remember thinking this was the most magical place in the world. I remember." She paused, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. "I remember your hand. How safe it felt. How certain I was that nothing bad could happen as long as you were holding on." They bought funnel cakes from the same vendor who'd been working the fair for 40 years. Though he didn't remember two sisters who'd shared powdered sugar and planned their evening around rides and games and staying up past bedtime. "Biggest one you've got," Linda said, echoing words she'd spoken decades ago to a little girl who'd wanted everything life had to offer. They found a picnic table away from the crowd and tore off pieces of fried dough. While carnival music played and children ran past with balloons tied to their wrists. "This time," Linda said, watching Megan lick powdered sugar from her fingers, "nobody disappears at the gate." "This time," Megan agreed, "we both know who we are and where we belong." As the evening wore on, they rode the Ferris wheel that Megan had loved as a child. At the top of the arc, the whole fair spread out below them like a constellation of light and movement and possibility. "What do you want to do when we get home?" Linda asked. "Sign the rest of my enrollment papers for school. Call the legal clinic to see if they need volunteers. Maybe organize our photos so we can remember which memories belong to which parts of our lives." "Sounds like a plan." They climbed down from the Ferris wheel and walked slowly toward the parking lot. Passing families and couples and groups of teenagers who had no idea they were witnessing a small miracle of two lives being rebuilt from fragments and determination. At home, Linda sat at her kitchen table signing forms and writing checks. While Megan sorted through boxes of photographs that would help her piece together 34 years of missing life. Insurance paperwork that would cover therapy and education. Donation pledges to the legal clinic that had helped them find each other. Forms to formalize their support group as a nonprofit organization. Each signature felt like a small victory. Each document represented a choice made freely, without coercion or manipulation or fear. "Linda," Megan said from the living room where she was arranging photos in chronological order, "what was I like as a kid?" "Before?" Linda looked up from her paperwork and studied her sister's face. Still beautiful. Still curious. But stronger now. More grounded. Less afraid to take up space or ask for what she needed. "You were brave," Linda said. "Curious about everything. You asked a million questions and never accepted simple answers. You wanted to see the world and help everyone you met. You believed that most problems could be solved with enough love and effort." "Do you think I'm still like that?" Linda watched Megan arrange photos of birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons when happiness had seemed like a permanent condition. Instead of something that could be stolen and hidden and nearly lost forever. "I think you're exactly who you were meant to be," Linda said. "Just older and wiser and strong enough to help other people find their way home too." That night, Linda turned off the kitchen lights and listened to the sounds of her sister moving around in the next room. Getting ready for bed, setting out clothes for tomorrow, planning a future that belonged entirely to herself. The house felt full in ways that had nothing to do with furniture or decoration. Full of conversation and shared meals and the comfortable rhythm of two people who'd chosen to build something together instead of taking from others. Outside, suburban sprinklers continued their endless cycle of growth and renewal. Inside, two sisters settled into the quiet satisfaction of lives reclaimed and futures wide open with possibility. Linda touched her throat where no engagement ring weighed heavy with false promises. She thought about love and family and the difference between choosing to share a life and being forced to surrender one. In the next room, Megan was humming again. The same nameless tune that might have been an old song or just the sound of contentment finding its voice. For the first time in 34 years, Linda fell asleep to the sound of her sister breathing in the next room, safe and free and exactly where she belonged. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for spending this time.